How about that? Every single goal of the game scored by an inaugural season Kraken member. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken do win, not with a shutout though. It's a 3-1 win for the Kraken, as the lone goal for the Blackhawks comes from an original member of the Kraken. But they still do manage to get the majority of the goals in the game and extend their winning streak to 3 now, making them also 3-0 on the homestand so far. And also, in so doing, getting back to NHL 500. And this is what we talked about coming into this homestand, that the first game against Vegas was going to be a tough one, but the Kraken played great coming off of that horrendous road trip, won that game, and then the schedule finally was going to lighten up a little bit after playing a lot of playoff teams from last year to open up the first month of the season. So when they started to get some of these teams that were more towards the bottom of the pack last year or have been struggling out of the gate this season, they needed to take advantage, and so far so good in the first 2 of those games, as they do beat a Blackhawks team that still isn't fantastic, though they are better than last year at the very least. To this point in the season anyway. Now, to be honest, it wasn't always the prettiest for the Kraken in this game, especially in the offensive end of things, where when they're at their best, which most of their wins have been them playing at least close to their best, they're much smoother and better in transition with the puck, a little crisper with passes, getting things set up on the offensive end, and creating some good scoring chances to create that offense, which there was some of that in this game, but the offensive end of things was a lot less crisp. There was some missed passes, general bobbles of the puck, or indecision when it came to shooting. A couple of times where they had a good setup, but then just missed the last pass, and in at least one case, actually kind of 2, just straight up missed an empty net. And I don't mean at the end of the game where they have the goaltender pulled and you're shooting from the other end of the ice. That's a little more understandable. I mean where you're in the offensive end and you get a good chance because the goaltender is well out of the net. Bjorkstrand missed a completely empty net, and then Beniers missed one later on in the game that, I mean, the goaltender was between him and the goal, but definitely not in a position that a goaltender would usually want to be in. Thankfully, though, that's all just kind of nitpicking, because regardless of any missed opportunities they did have offensively, they played very well at the other end of the ice and still took advantage of enough opportunities to end up coming out with the win. In some cases, just kind of finding a way to win a game where they might not have been at their best at both ends of the ice. I mean, it certainly does help at the other end of the ice when you only allow 4 shots on goal through the first 33 or so minutes of the game. And yeah, there was a couple of moments in the first, and I think they were both in the first period, maybe there was one in the second, where Decord had a bit of an adventure with the puck. One was just kind of a bad bounce. He goes out to play the puck behind the net and it bounces out in front of the net, but he's able to poke it away before Donato can put it into the net, which kept the score still scoreless in the first. And then there was another one, I'm pretty sure, again, it was still later on in the first period. It was still scoreless, and the entire first period was scoreless, I suppose, as we get into the game, where Decord goes out to handle the puck, this time in front of his net. He's looking for a pass, and then just kind of flubs the pass. It just kind of drifts out into, fortunately, empty open ice in the Kraken end, so there's not a Blackhawk player that's right there to get that flub pass and turn around and fire it off before Decord can get back into his net. He's still kind of just standing there in front of the crease. So once again, the Kraken are fortunately able to dodge another bullet. Decord usually very good at handling the puck. He's one of the best goaltenders, I would say, in the NHL at handling the puck. Just tonight, maybe not his best, but fortunately, neither instance ends up costing the Kraken. He's able to recover from the first one, and the second one doesn't go to a Kraken player like you wanted it, but it also doesn't go to an opponent either. And I mean, who knows? Maybe Decord was just getting bored back there and was more eager to go play the puck, as, again, he only faced 4 shots for the first over half of the game. Only 3 shots in the first period, as the Kraken, by the end of the first, even with it still scoreless, were out shooting the Blackhawks 10-0. And like I said, it wasn't always pretty offensively. The Kraken did get off to a pretty good offensive start, got a couple pretty good chances. Then things kind of lulled to, just kind of back and forth. The two teams really not able to get effectively into the offensive end at either end of the ice through most of the middle of the first period. And then the back half of the first, the Kraken once again started to take some control, get a few more opportunities. But like I said, even with the Kraken power play in the first, we still get to the first intermission with the ice yet to be broken. And then, unfortunately, the second period gets off to a pretty bad start for the Kraken, and not in the traditional sense of it got off to a good start for Chicago or anything like that, But on literally the first shift of the second period, Eberle goes down chasing a puck down into the offensive end on the forecheck. It's just kind of one of those where the feet gets tangled with the defenseman. They both slide into the boards, but Eberle goes back first and was very slow to get up, is bent over all the way getting off the ice and then down the tunnel, would not return to this game. And we also didn't really get anything after the game, is all Bilesma had to say, and this is fairly typical. It's not like you're usually going to hear any major injury updates from the game right afterwards. But all he could say was that he was still being evaluated and hopefully would have more news on what Eberle's status is going to be going forward tomorrow, or I guess today as of when you're watching this. Which, even outside of what it could mean for the Kraken going forward, I mean, fortunately they just picked up Daniel Sprong, so if Eberle does have to miss time, they have a capable scorer that can step in, probably not right into that spot, but they have someone to fill the lineup, not just calling someone up from Coachella Valley. I mean, Ryan Winterton maybe could fill that, but they have Daniel Sprong ready to go, so hopefully Eberle doesn't have to miss too much time, especially considering not only is he the captain, but he's been one of the leading scorers for the Kraken so far this season, and has been a pretty big part of that first line that has really started to get going here over these last few games. Which, of course, then for the rest of this game specifically, where there's still basically 2 full periods left, it does mean that it's a rotating cast there on the other wing. We saw Tanev there. We saw Burakovsky there. Bjorkstrand, I think, got a shift with Beniers and McCann. Even Shane Wright had a couple of shifts as Beniers' other winger. And while that mixing and matching certainly added a little bit of extra challenge to how that line produced offensively the rest of the game, it certainly didn't seem to affect them on their next shift out. Well, actually, maybe not their next shift. A couple of shifts later, they get back into the offensive end again. And at least in this case, it didn't really matter who that other wing was, as it's McCann and Beniers on the rush, 2-on-1, 2-on-2. It's basically a 2-on-1. McCann with the puck as he skates in. He's looking pass all the way, gets it across to Beniers, with the second defender coming in, is able to get just a piece of it to break up the pass, but not enough. It still slides right up to Beniers. And while it slows down enough that he kind of has to go to a knee to get the shot off, he's still able to get it off and lifts it into the back of the net to give the Kraken the first goal of the game, breaking the ice. And Beniers does end up also awkwardly sliding into the boards after scoring this goal, as he kind of had to go to a knee and then shoot from on a knee as well as a skate, but he's able to get up and he's perfectly fine. So the Kraken don't go down another top forward after this goal. Regardless, Beniers picks up his 4th of the season. McCann his 12th assist already, and I said it didn't matter who the other winger was, but in this case it was Bjorkstrand as he gets the secondary assist. Still, most of this play happens on that 2-on-1 rush, or again, kind of 2-on-2, since it is the second player in for the Blackhawks that at least gets a piece of the pass. Still, it doesn't matter as Beniers puts that perfect touch on the pass, even with the slight interruption, to get the Kraken on the board first. And not long after, the Kraken end up on their second power play, which, although it does end up coming up empty just like the first one, unlike the first one, they actually got some offensive opportunities and nearly scored on a couple of occasions. Some good plays, got set up in the offensive end a couple of times, just weren't able to get that little bit of finish that they needed to make it 2-0 still early on in the second. Aside from that, though, the goal and the power play that doesn't score but gets close, the rest of the first 13 to 14 minutes of the second period is pretty similar to the first period. I wouldn't necessarily say that the Kraken were all over the Blackhawks, although the shot total makes it look that way. It's kind of just more that the Kraken weren't letting the Blackhawks get anywhere near even getting a shot on goal, much less getting to the Kraken net. And offensively, yeah, it was still a little clumsy, but I mean, if the other team can't score, as long as you have one goal, that's all that really matters. From there, though, the Blackhawks do start to actually get some shots on goal. I mean, nothing particularly dangerous, mind you. They're all stuff from the outside, and a lot of them are contested shots. Pretty easy saves for Decord to make, but it still is shots on goal nonetheless, which they didn't have for the first 33, 34 minutes of the game, where they had 4 shots in the first half plus of the game, as opposed to the final 6 or 7 minutes of the second period, where they suddenly increased their shot production to right about a shot per minute for those final few minutes. Again, nothing dangerous. It does include about 30 seconds of a power play that they get, which it kind of felt like if the Blackhawks were going to have a chance to tie the game at 1, this was going to be it. But 30 seconds into it, Seth Jones takes an interference call. He goes to the box, so we go to 4-on-4. That doesn't go anywhere through the final 40 seconds of the period, and we head to the second intermission with the Kraken still leading 1-0. And feels like a pretty safe 1-0. Again, they really haven't allowed the Blackhawks to get anything going offensively. Even the shots that they did start to get towards the end of the second, like I said, were not particularly dangerous. Really, their best chances of scoring were the two dicey moments for Decord handling the puck in the first period, and even there he was able to get out of dodge without giving up even a shot on goal in either of those attempts. So yeah, all in all, even though it is just a 1-goal, 1-0 lead and one shot could change the game entirely, it feels like a weirdly safe 1-0 lead that the Kraken have. And then early on in the third period, when the Kraken get their chance on their third power play, which is only going to last 26 seconds as the 4-on-4 comes to an end, as it turns out that 26 seconds was more than enough for the Kraken on this third power play attempt. As the 4-on-4 comes to an end, the Kraken get possession of the puck in their end, quickly transition through the neutral zone. The puck gets up to Stevenson to carry into the offensive end, and he carries it all the way down past the goal line, and then gets a crossing pass right across Mrazek's face in net to Schwartz on the far side. Mrazek then reacts by going to the far side to try to get that block or save on a potential Schwartz shot. But instead of taking that shot right away from the far side, Schwartz instead decides to take the puck right back to the side that the pass came from. As Mrazek goes one way, Schwartz goes the other, and that leaves an empty net for Schwartz to put the power play goal into. He does so, picks up his 200th goal of his NHL career, and puts the Kraken up 2-0 with the power play goal. I guess sometimes all you need is that one quick rush, and it doesn't really need to be a 2-minute power play. The Kraken on the night go 1 for 3 on the power play, even though the one that lasted 26 seconds is the one that they score on. And as it turns out, it's a good thing the Kraken get this power play goal and the 2-0 lead, because, well, one shot is all it takes, or in this case, technically 2 shots. For the Blackhawks, just a couple minutes later, or within 2 minutes of the Kraken taking the 2-0 lead, they get it right back. It's Ryan Donato doing it all. He intercepts a pass in the neutral zone, takes it into the Kraken end, fires off a shot from way up at the top of the faceoff circle, which Decord is able to save relatively easily, but he doesn't see the rebound go out to the far side of the net, or at least doesn't see it for a split second, and then by the time he does see it, Donato is able to get to the puck just barely before Decord can. He flings it at the net. It ends up going off of the post next to Decord, but then comes back out off of Decord's foot as he tries to close off the post, and that puts it into the net to give Donato the unassisted goal. Pretty good start to the season for Donato. It's his 8th of the season already, which if he was playing for the Kraken would tie McCann for the team lead. But it, in this case, cuts the Kraken lead in half, making it 2-1. Fortunately, though, from there, the Kraken go back to locking things down defensively, not allowing the Blackhawks to get good transition, get really set up in the offensive end, and even if they do get set up in the offensive end, which they did a couple of times, it's kept entirely to the outside. I think Decord really only has to make one more relatively difficult save throughout the entire third period, until eventually, with less than 2 minutes left, actually closer to 1 minute left, the Blackhawks are able to get Mrazek pulled. The Kraken missed the empty net a couple of times. There's a couple of icings. But actually, after the second icing, which turns out not to be an icing because Seth Jones got just a piece of it as it was cleared down to the other end, there's a fumbled pass on the way to Bedard. Tanev's able to intercept it, and he puts it into the empty net to pick up his 4th goal in the last 3 games. Tanev with 4 goals so far on this homestand. This one is the least difficult of it. He hits the empty net from inside the offensive end, but nonetheless gets paid out and rewarded for a hard-working 3 games and being a significant part of this now 3-game win streak for the Kraken as they finish this one 3-1. So once again, it was far from a perfect game for the Kraken. They certainly gave up some opportunities offensively, missed a couple empty nets, had a couple of other great chances that they either just didn't take the shot or didn't connect on one last pass. Type of stuff we have seen before when they're not clicking necessarily at their best. They had a couple moments in the defensive end where against a better opponent it might have ended up in their net. I'm not necessarily convinced that if they played this exact game that it would have gone particularly well against some of the NHL's best teams like the ones the Kraken had been playing pretty frequently throughout the end of the last homestand and that road trip. But who's to say how things would have gone against a better team? The point is that they did find a way to win this game, and at the very least, they did get off to a good start. It slowed down in the middle part of that first period, but they at least got out to that good start that they were definitely emphasizing after the slow start in the previous game against the Blue Jackets. They definitely played a better first period than they did against Columbus, which is another team that even if their record looks a little bit better than people would have expected, is another team like the Blackhawks that the Kraken really shouldn't have had too much trouble with if they do think of themselves as a potential playoff team. So yeah, at the very least, they do get off to a better start, a much better first period than the game against Columbus or most of the games on the road trip. And then the second period and third period, the rest of the game, maybe there's something to be said for the offensive struggles and miscues that they have offensively, trying to transition down the ice or get that one last pass in the offensive end, having something to do with just the entire forward end, or most of the forward end anyway. Certainly the top two lines, and even the third line was getting mixed up quite a bit. But just the lines kind of got thrown into a blender to a certain extent once Eberle went down. They were having to have guys step up to play extra shifts on that first line, and then whoever was playing that extra shift on the first line wouldn't be able to play their normal shift when it came up next, so then you'd have someone else step into that one. It just kind of threw things off a bit, and maybe that had something to do with a couple of those missed opportunities in the second and third period. Who knows? I guess we'll find out in these next couple of games against an Islanders team that, well, you never know what you're going to get. There's an Islanders team that plays pretty well and an Islanders team that looks like one of the worst teams in the league. Not, I guess, terribly unlike what we've seen from the Kraken so far this season. So we'll see which Islanders team shows up on Saturday. And regardless, we'll be seeing a very good New York Rangers team on Sunday for the second half of a back-to-back. And, well, as we know, weekend back-to-backs so far this season have not gone well for the Kraken. So we'll see if they can take this success that they've been able to have against, Vegas is a very good team, but a couple of teams that they should be able to take care of business against, and transition that into a couple of more difficult opponents, or certainly at least one more difficult opponent in the Rangers on the second half of that back-to-back on Sunday. But before we move on from this game entirely, though, and put it in the past, we do close things out, as always, with the Kraken 3 stars, brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help support the channel a little bit more than you already are, and have a say in who the Kraken 3 stars are after every game, or in some cases if there are 3 stars, you can go to the link down below in the description to Patreon and support over there. With the first star in this game, I gotta go with Matty Beniers. He does have a fantastic game. Yeah, and he probably could have scored 1 or 2 more times. Certainly the time where he has Mrazek between the 2 face-off circles well out of his net. Mrazek still is between him and the net, and because he's so far out of the net, I suppose he's taking away a lot more angle. But that's probably one that Beniers would like to have back. And then he had one other one, a setup from McCann that he mentioned also wishing he had another chance at, so I guess for Beniers, maybe he'll be thinking about a hat trick that could have been. Even without that, though, he had a very good night. He put the Kraken on the board first, and that line, even once Eberle did go down, was still the most productive offensively for the team, even regardless of who they had on the wing. They almost had Burakovsky for a goal. Bjorkstrand had a pretty good chance later in the game. He missed an empty net, or mostly empty net, although I don't know that was with the first line. Either way, that line was still producing even without Eberle in it. Hopefully they won't have to play that way for very long, and Eberle can come back for at least part of this back-to-back coming up. Of course, as far as that's concerned, only time will tell. As far as the second star, I am going to go with the other goal scorer for the Kraken, or the other non-empty net goal scorer for the Kraken, in Jaden Schwartz, picking up his 200th of his career. And another guy that could have had a couple more goals in this game, just a couple more missed opportunities, maybe nothing quite as blatant as the empty net that Bjorkstrand misses, or Beniers not able to score when Mrazek's way outside of his net. Still, a great night nonetheless, and one of the better offensive producers for the Kraken, even outside of that huge milestone goal that he gets. And yeah, pretty notable, that one there with the 200 goals of his career. Obviously, a lot of that happening with the Blues. And then the third star I do think is a little bit more difficult. I could see it going any number of different ways. McCann is certainly an option. Even Bjorkstrand, I thought, had a pretty good game. He could be an option. Shane Wright continues to do a lot of things that are not necessarily showing up on the score sheet, but that line is at least creating a lot of pressure for the Kraken, getting them into the offensive end so that then other lines can kind of take over and do the rest. I thought Wright had a pretty good game on a couple of times where he stepped up onto the wing of Beniers. Those two created a couple of chances offensively. But ultimately, I think you got to give it to a defenseman, with especially the defensive effort from the first 34 minutes of the game. And to me, the biggest standout defenseman in this game was without question Riker Evans. He had a fantastic game, had a couple of very good plays defensively that shut down potential chances for the Blackhawks. So yeah, we'll go with Riker Evans as the third star. That makes it Beniers 1, Schwartz 2, Evans 3, and Yeah, with that, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. 3 wins for the Kraken in a row, a sudden 180 turnaround from that road trip that did not go very well, especially towards the end of it. Yeah, good to see the Kraken taking advantage of a bit of a lighter chunk of the schedule here, at least as far as opponent quality is concerned. They're still playing, well, I guess they did get a bit of a break, but now they'll be playing another weekend back-to-back, so a lot more back-to-backs than they had last season. And hopefully they can keep this going throughout the rest of the homestand and get back on the positive side of 500. Until then, though, as always, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.